Hey there, listener. It's the digital novelist, Keith Hayden, back with another episode of the Digital Novelist Podcast. To begin, if you're interested in writing your own story, head over to my website, keithhayden.net. There, you're going to find a ton of resources in my Digital Novelist Explorer Kit, including an opportunity to answer 4 questions about your story and get an instant outline delivered to your email. How does that sound? Pretty cool, huh? Just head over to my website, keithhayden.net. You'll find it somewhere around this video or this recording. Today, I want to talk about what happens when you hate your writing. Because I feel like this happens often with us as writers. We have a certain standard, and I think we know what we're capable of. And when what we write doesn't really hit the mark, it does something to us. It kind of fucks us up in a certain way. So I want to talk about that because that was the experience I had today when working on chapter 36 of my supernatural horror novel, Gates of Okinawa. If you go back a few months where I've talked about this project, some of my older YouTube videos and episodes of this podcast, you'll know that this was a very experimental project from the beginning because the original plan was to write it in a single month using AI. That plan obviously failed because it's been about 6 months and I'm still writing this novel. But in that process, I was using AI to write drafts of chapters, and I did it very fast. So I ran up on one of these AI-generated chapters today, and as you can imagine, it was pretty bad, especially at this point to where I'm so deep into the story. I'm a little probably almost at the exact halfway point in the story. So this is one of the problems with working with AI. It loses context the more you give it, and it just can't keep up with all the little nuances of the story. It forgets characters, it forgets plot points. It's just pretty bad. When I saw this chapter last night, I started looking at it and I was like, oh shit, this is going to take some work. But it wasn't just the AI. It was more, I didn't like my idea for this chapter. I wasn't excited about it. There wasn't anything. It's one of those, those chapters that if done incorrectly can really lead to a really shitty middle part of the story, which is, if you're going to have a bad part of your story, of any story, it doesn't matter if it's a movie, a book, whatever, the middle is the place where you typically find it, right? Because when you jump into the story, it's all exciting, new characters, new scenarios, all this new stuff. And then at the end, it tends to be the most exciting, right? Because you're getting to the climax and you understand what the stakes are. But the middle is where, the muddy middle, the saggy middle, in any creative pursuit I've done, no matter from music to programming, the middle is the most difficult part to get through. You're halfway through the forest. You can't see the entrance, but you can't see the exit. And you just have to keep trudging to get to the end. So this was one of those chapters when I read the draft. Not only was it the AI output was crap, but I just didn't like my initial idea for the chapter. But it's one of those necessary chapters where you can't just teleport the characters from one climax to the next. You need to have some type of smoothness to it, and that's where this chapter really came in. So I didn't like the writing. What did I start with? Well, obviously I had to had to go to work on this chapter and rewrite a lot of it. But here's kind of how I think about it now when it comes to rewrites. I start with baseline. Description. Description tends to be my weakest area. Maybe it's yours, I don't know, but you can always add more vivid descriptions, better pictures to make the chapter stand out more. If you can't really think of you don't like what you wrote, and especially in a novel, then adding more description is a good thing to do. And that's what I did with this chapter. I just went to town on description. I worked on it a lot, and I really like what I came out with. The next thing you can do is take a look at your characters and ask yourself, what can I do to develop these characters or make them stand out more in this scene? Can I, add more dialogue? Can I add more interactions? Can I add more character moments where there's a physicality to them, or add more detail in that sense? And that's what I did with this chapter. Because before it was just, this is one thing where the AI is very weak at. It just can't, like I said, it loses context with the characters, so it doesn't know who's who, and it just starts adding random things. But, we're halfway through the story. Reader knows who the characters are. I know who the characters are. I don't want to change anything about that, but I want them to express themselves more vividly in the story. So that's what I did here. I added in my story, Gates of Okinawa, I have this group of students, and the students are a big part of the progression of the story. They're kind of a team. They link up with their teacher, and together they're kind of going through this adventure. So the student moments were pretty thin in the initial draft, so I went and punched those up a little bit. I added a few more interactions to let them kind of display their personalities in this kind of very weird scenario that they're in. They've basically been drawn into this subset of reality that's very trippy. I describe it as like a technicolor kind of fever dream that they're in. And this is where they're interacting with the spirit. They're basically interrogating and asking where their friend was taken by a higher demon. So this was the scenario in the story. So that's the second thing I would do, is add more character moments, because this isn't an action chapter. You can't really accelerate things there. So really description and character moments. The last thing I'll say about when you don't like your writing is, don't freak out. I think, especially the more experience you have, I'm a very experienced writer. I've been writing for decades, and I still come out with bad ideas when it comes to first drafts and stories, and that's okay, because I feel like you can always go back and tweak it. You can always go back and make it better, but don't expect yourself to be a genius every time and have those moments. And I think I read it somewhere that to get to the best parts of your writing, you have to get through the worst of your writing, which not everything you write is going to be bad. As a matter of fact, what I've seen working on this novel pretty much every day for the past 6 months is that my average level of writing has risen. So when I put out something, or when I start writing, I know it's going to be of a little bit higher quality than when I started 6 months ago. And that's a good thing. That's what you get from consistent practice. But it's not going to be a hit every time. You're not always going to have all I need to do is polish up some mechanics, some commas, whatever, and then call it a day. You're going to have to go back and zoom out. And that's how I think of writing in general. When you're writing the initial draft of something, you're paying attention to the individual words as you get it out. Then maybe you finish the piece, and then you go back to edit. Now you're looking line by line. At least this is how I think about it. You're looking at it sentence by sentence. Basically, do these sentences go with that sentence? Does this kind of flow into this? Because the ideas are down. And then you zoom out further, you're looking at the paragraphs now. You're looking at, does the structure of this chapter make sense? Is it engaging? Am I saying what I want to say? Am I showing what I want to show? And then all the way out to the entire story level. No matter if your story is a flash fiction or if it's an entire novel, you've got to eventually zoom out and make sure all of that continuity is there. And that's a hard thing to do with a novel, because it takes just a long time to get there. Especially this Gates of Okinawa is looking like it's pushing almost 100K words now, up from 80K from the original draft. But in this case, for me, it's a good thing because I know I tend to start writing minimalist and then I add more in the second draft than I take away. But that's just me. I know some people, they're the opposite. They put down everything and then they have to cut a lot of things. That's not how I work. But that's all I really wanted to say in this one. As I mentioned, this chapter, to me, it's not very, I did what I could to make it memorable and make it belong. But, it is what it is. And I will end with this. I will say that there's no bad ideas. But there are ideas that are more difficult to work with than others. And that's the hard part about writing a novel. In the first part, with the first draft, is you don't really have the picture of the end. You don't know how to adjust things and tweak things. You're just getting stuff down for your story. But at this point, I'm on the second draft, so I know how the story ends. I know where the characters end up. I know how things end, so it's easier for me to do setups and add certain details or certain lines in there for the story. That's all I wanted to say in this one. I'm sitting here recording this, and I'm like, yeah, it was an okay chapter. I hope this helps you with if you're thinking about your writing. And that's the thing, like I know I've been meeting more fiction writers lately, and I feel like the analysis paralysis, the perfectionism, it really holds people back from getting their story down. It sure as hell holds them back from putting their story out. They'll tell themselves at the end all day that it's not perfect. I know it can be better. I'm going to tell you this, it can always be better. I read published books that I've published, stories that I've published, and I'm like, yeah, I see where I could have added this. I could have changed and tweaked that word, whatever. But I think that the magic of telling stories is that it's that snapshot of a moment in time. Even if you go back and edit, there's, it's a snapshot of your ability as a writer. It's a snapshot of the time you have and what you're willing to put into that story in the moment. Because sometimes you just don't have the time to really give it everything you have. Other times you don't feel like it. You feel called to tell another story, or you lose kind of fire and motivation for the story that you're telling. So why did I bring this up? Basically to say those things, perfectionism and wanting it to be perfect on the first try, those are going to hold you back. They're slowing you down. The best thing is to write something you hate to get to something that you like eventually, whether that's through editing or just through number of reps, because your quality will rise if you write every day, especially if you're writing in the same genre, the same style every day. And that's why I like novels, because you get a lot of practice. And when I started this project, I remember thinking, man, I'm just not good at writing horror because I'm not in the horror mindset. I don't consume a lot of horror media, so it was really hard for me to get into, like, how do you make a good horror story? 6 months later, I feel much more comfortable that I can put together a horror story that has the atmosphere that I want, that has the tension that I want, in a way that readers expect it. That only came through writing bad horror for 3 or 4 months before I've gotten to that point. So don't give up. Keep showing up every day. And I hope this episode of this podcast was helpful for you. Once again, if you want more help with your novel, head to keithhayden.net. I love hearing different story ideas and helping people develop them into something that they can turn into a novel. As I've been meeting more fiction writers, I've noticed there seems to be a very small percentage of people who are writing novels, because I get it. It's hard. It's a discipline that if you actually want to get a novel done and out in a reasonable amount of time, not years or decades, like you want to do it like within a few months or something, then you got to dedicate time. You've got to put a lot of things aside, and I know that struggle well. But I want to help you do it better. Head to keithhayden.net and check out everything that I've got. Subscribe to my email list, and I guarantee you that I will help you become a better novelist or just a long-form fiction writer in general. Thanks for listening to this episode. I'll see you in the next one.